more requirements. So here I'm going to try and model the way you get into the Microsoft building, which is generally through tapping your blue badge. Or if you've forgotten your blue badge, you have to go up to the reception. And you have to say to the receptionist, please give me a temporary badge of shame, which you stick on here like a scarlet letter. Actually, the new ones are really cool. The new ones have like a picture of the Space Needle that fades away after 12 hours. And so if there's no picture of the Space Needle on your badge anymore, it's expired, because it used to have a really tiny expired by, and a really tiny that said you must be escorted by, you know, an FGE. But these things are kind of cool. So here is our primary building entry. I'm going to say I must have a badge. So I'm going to build up my policy and say I have a requirement that I can enter the office, and the handler that I have is going to check that I have a badge. And then I need to register the handler in DI, which is where the step I always forget when I try and do these things live. And then nothing works. So your handlers need to be registered in DI. Here I'm cheating, it's a singleton, but obviously if you are going to take in database contexts, don't ever do it as a singleton. And then we apply it in much the same way that we used to do things like roles. We have the authorize attribute, and we specify the policy name that we used when we built it in our configuration. And lo and behold, that will work. It will call the code in our policy, it will pass through the user, it will pass through a context, and you can decide whether someone has met the requirements or not. And if they have, they'll get through. If they haven't, they'll get bounced to forbidden, because now we can tell the difference.
Question.
Yes?
So in the policy, we can add multiple requirements. Let's say one of them pass. Is there a way to find which requirement that pass in that policy?
Is there a way, if we have multiple requirements? Okay, so the way it works is if you have multiple requirements in a policy, all the requirements must pass. But if there are multiple handlers for an individual requirement, only one of those handlers must pass. And the demo will make it clearer. But before you follow that up, no, you cannot tell which handler for a requirement has passed, because it shouldn't matter by the time it falls through to you, through to your controller. All you care about is it has passed. But you can log things. You can inject a logger in there and log what you want. But it doesn't matter at that point, because we're having separation of concerns. All you care about by the time it hits your controller is whether someone is able to get to it or not. You don't care how they fulfilled that requirement.
So what if during the handler we know that okay, this particular handler passed, then we inject the claim inside the context?
No changing users inside handlers. You can, and then we'll overwrite your change because you're a horrible person. At that point, a user has authenticated. You should not be mutating their identity during authorization. You mutate someone's identity when they are authenticating. That's it. After that, they are done. They are static. So, let's swap to the last demo.
On that, so just
Yes.
so we don't have to bring it up again later. So is there like an injectable thing to allow you to mutate claims after they're deserialized from the cookie or from the JOT?
Yes, there are. There are events on each of the authentication services that will allow you to change an identity after it has been deserialized or created from whatever has been sent. There's also a claims transformation service, so you can actually centralize it. So instead of hooking it up to individual pieces of authentication services, you can do it for everything as a whole. So it doesn't matter if it came from a cookie, it doesn't matter if it came from a JOT. If you have both, it will eventually fall through to the claims transformation service, and you can write the same code for both. But if you only want it for cookies, there's an event in cookies. If you only want it for JOT, there's an event in JOT. You can do it for WSFed, you can do it for AAD, you can do it for OAuth. Unfortunately, the event names are different in every single one, because we don't like to make things too easy. So, here we have I am trying to remember what country I ran this in last. Because I sometimes personalize these based on whatever conference it is. And unfortunately, I didn't have this right. This was in Belgium. So, here we have an authorization requirement of what you can dip fries in. Okay? So, I am going to attempt to put tomato sauce on my fries. And this one works very well, not just in Belgium, where they are slightly different because it's Europe, but it also works in America. So I'm going to hit dip, and on my dip controller action, it has an authorize. And so what it's first going to do is it's going to send me the login. So we have the suave British person on the left. We have an American tourist. We have Tintin, who is Belgian. I should have changed the American tourist. Please don't put that in your feedback. Okay, so I'm going to log in as a British person.
He's from Texas. He's not from Seattle.
Don't lie, because now the sun is out, I am seeing socks and sandals already around here, and oh my God, what is wrong with people? I will log in. Okay, and I have successfully dipped my fries, or my chips, because that's what they are in the UK. I've dipped my chips in tomato sauce. So I'm going to change my condiment now. And I'm going to change it to, that is the Unicode for an egg. Okay, so I'm going to change it, which is representing mayonnaise. So I'm just going to change my okay. And now I'm still Hugh Grant. And if I try and dip my fries in mayonnaise, no. There's absolutely no way I can do that because I am not Dutch. I am British. So, I'm going to sign out. I'm going to dip. And lo and behold, if I choose Tintin, I can dip mayonnaise. But if I change my condiment to tomato sauce, or ketchup, or catsup. What is the difference between ketchup and catsup?
Pronunciation.
Tomatoes. Is it like a northern southern thing?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Potato.
Yeah, so I am Belgium. I cannot dip my fries in tomato sauce because that is not the done thing. So we'll sign him out. I am American tourist, so I can dip my fries in tomato sauce. I change my condiment to mayonnaise. Can't dip. And then if I change it to, what the hell is wrong with you people? What is with chili cheese fries? That is just disgusting. Okay, but I can use chili and I can dip my fries in chili and get it all over myself. My wife made me sloppy joes once, and I'm like, please don't ever do this again. I have no idea why this is a good thing. So, we're going to look at the code behind this, and hopefully it will all become clear. So, we have, in our startup, I have a policy that requires an authenticated user, so that's why I get prompted for login. And then I have another requirement I'm going to add, which is the condiment requirement. And then I add my authorization handler for that requirement. I also have, to make things look a little bit more real, a condiment provider where I can go back to a database of condiments, i.e. a string array, and pull things out. So, here's my condiment provider. I'm going to get a current that's what allows me to switch between condiments. It's not particularly important for the authorization purposes, but it's going to allow me to mirror a database. So my condiment requirement, nice and simple, empty, there's nothing there. My handler is going to check if there is an authenticated user. it's going to check that that user has a country, and then it's going to look at whatever the current condiment is. This is where our provider comes into it, trying to pretend to be a database. You can see that I'm basically injecting this in the constructor. And if I'm British, it'll always work with ketchup. If I'm Belgium, it will always work with mayo. And if I'm American, it just won't work with mayo or work with anything else. And you'll see that I'm always calling context.succeed, nothing else. And the reason I call context.succeed, I don't have a context.fail, because if there are multiple handlers for a requirement, another one might succeed. And I'll come on to that in a minute. So that's how this is all playing together. So when I then apply my policy, it will look at the current user, it will pull out a property of the current user, it will go off to my fake provider, which is being a database, pull some information from that, and then make a decision on whether the current request can fulfill the requirement. And if the requirement is fulfilled, if I'm calling context.succeed, it's all good. Otherwise, I get bounced to the forbidden page, which is what you saw when it said, ooh, you can't eat that. Does this make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I told you it would make more sense when there was a demo. So the labs are there for this. There is an authentication lab, which takes you through how you wire up authentication and how it all fits together. And there is an authorization lab, and they're all on my GitHub account, which is linked to from the website.
So the custom requirement, where and how do we initialize some like additional property if we have any?
So you can, that's actually covered in the lab. I have an age requirements demo where I have a generic age requirement, oh dear. But it has a property of minimum age. So you can set it to 18 or 21, and you set that up when you are building the policy. So you can reuse requirements like that are parameterized. So they just end up being a property of the requirement, however you like. So remember, authorization requirement has nothing to it. You can implement what you want in that class. So you pass things around by having properties that are initialized when you build the property. So like I said.
So the type you implement is handlers. Is policy didn't look like it was a type, right? It's just
Correct. It's just a marker interface.
Okay. No, sorry. Isn't policy a collection of handlers?
Policy is a collection of requirements.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
policy is made up of one or more requirements. So, you must be authenticated, you must be over 18, or you must be over 21. So those are two requirements. So, all requirements in a policy have to pass. And all requirements are evaluated, even if a previous one fails, because people like to log these things and we don't want to short circuit you. Requirements just have this marker interface and they can have multiple handlers. And handlers basically handle a requirement and they need to be registered in DI. So a handler calls context.succeed if you pass. If it's unsuccessful, you do nothing. So think about entering into the Microsoft building. One way of fulfilling that requirement is I have a working blue badge. Another way of fulfilling that requirement is I have an active visitor pass. Two ways of fulfilling the same requirement. So if one of them passes, I call context.succeed. If that hasn't worked, it's going to go on to the next one. And that one may call context.succeed. There is a context.fail. You should not generally need to call this, but it's in there for horrific services like, oh shit, my database has just dropped out. There is no point in evaluating everything else, because I know they all rely on the same database. Why would I want to go through that pain? That is your quick abort for things that, it's just, I can't go any further. Just kill off the entire thing. And that will fill everything. Even if something else has succeeded, that will fill everything.
That sounds like something that needs a big caveat in the docs.
Oh, it does. It has a huge caveat in the docs. Except they don't allow me to be as sarcastic in the docs as I am in person. I love our doc writers. I send them these really weird this needs documented. It does this, 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 and this is where this is where users will just get it horribly wrong, and they turn it into this beautiful documentation system that is marvelously written and makes me look like a genius. And they keep putting my name at the top, and I'm like, I didn't write this. You guys wrote it. Take the credit for it. And they're like, no, we don't want the blame. People will ask you. People will actually ask you questions about this because it's yours. I'm like, I mean, the worst one is that we published guidance on how to get TLS 1.2 working in .NET Framework 3.5, 4, 4.5, 4.6, and that document is horrendously complicated, and it has my name on it. And I'm like, no, please take my name off, because I don't want the questions. By the way, the right answer to that is retarget against .NET 4.7, and then just let it go. So, because all these things are in code, what we saw when people were writing their own authorization attributes is there would be a bunch of places where they would want to check it in code as well. And usually the way people did that was they cut and pasted the darn thing out of the authorization attribute. So you don't need to do that. You can check these things imperatively in code. In your controller, inject iAuthorizationService service, and then just call authorize async on it. Give it the policy name, and we're done. If it fails, you can return new forbidden result, and it will do everything that it's supposed to do. Marvelous. And like I say, you need to register your handlers in DI. And remember your DI scope if you're using EF. Now, if you are having multiple identity providers, it is imperative, no pun intended, that you check your claims issuer. Because you don't want to branch on a claim that has come from Facebook thinking it's a claim that's come from Twitter. So when you add the authentication services, you can set a default issuer for each individual authentication service so you know where the identity has come from, so you can branch accordingly. Also, it's like, if you want to let yourself into a Microsoft building, it has to be like, I have to have a Microsoft badge. A Nintendo badge will not work. So that's the equivalent of checking the claims issuer. And then we have resource-based authorization, which is the same thing again, except with an extra parameter. So you just basically give it a document class, or an Excel spreadsheet class, or whatever the resource is that you are authorizing against, and then in imperative stuff, because you can't do this declaratively, because at that point in the pipeline, we haven't started running your code, so we can't get access to a resource that you have constructed. So you can check it like this. So here we have a resource requirement. So we're passing in a requirement. In this case, what I have is an operation authorization requirement. So you could imagine those being, it's in the enum that has read and write and everything else based on it, and the document. And then I'm going to look inside the document. I'm going to check the document owner against the current user, and if it's the current user, it passes. So this is still expressed in exactly the same way, using exactly the same code. It's just, I have another parameter. Wonderful. And remember, these things stack. So you can have the administrator handler also handling access to the document. And from that one, you just say, okay, I'm succeeding because an administrator should be able to do whatever they want. So that's how you stack them. So there are ways to authorize everywhere. Again, because everything is a policy, I just call policy builder. I'm going to call require authenticated user, build a policy, add it as a filter. Because these things end up as filters underneath the hood. And I can also do this whole limit by scheme thing inside the policy, so I don't have to express it on the authorize attribute. And I'm back to this please don't branch on path. I can require a particular scheme within my policy. So this would be something that I apply to an API. So I'm going to say I have to require an authenticated user, and it needs to have come from my bearer authentication service. Then you can do really horrible things. This makes a lot of people grow. This makes a lot of people happy. It depends on how pure you want to be. Because remember, the authorization service is just a service in DI. And inside Razor, inside your Razor page, you can inject things from DI. This makes a lot of people grow. So you can inject the authorization service into into a Razor page, and then call authorize async and show or hide things in your view based on the evaluation of that policy. Now, for the purists among you, yes, the right way to do this is to pass flags in the view model. Some people don't like that. They want to do things direct in their code, and they are able to do so. Do it in a view model. So, what I will say is obviously showing and hiding things in the UI is not a great security mechanism. It's security by obscurity, so you need to also duplicate the checks in the code in your controllers. And like I say, you can replace the entire thing. In 2.0, we were doing it via stringification. In 2.1, it's still stringification. In 2.2, we will finally look at a way of allowing you to specify proper parameters on a custom authorized attribute and pull them out in your policy. It's the only thing we're lacking right now. Data protection. Did we go on to encryption? Oh, yes.
Just me?
Yes.
So you said always validate your issuers, your
Yes.
claim issuers?
Yes, if you have multiple.
Okay, yeah, because like JWTs don't, they have a global issuer, don't they?
They do. Well, no.
They don't have an issuer
it's
per claim?
the ISS field in every JOT token, so it
Right,
depends.
Right, but it's one issuer for all claims in that JOT
Yes.
token, right?
Yes, but that's also the same for most identities. If I come from Facebook and I've constructed an identity out of Facebook, it's probably all going to be from Facebook. Now, you are right in that I can construct an identity in identity server and other things where sources could come from multiple things, but it's really, really rare.
But that can't be expressed in a single JWT, right?
Yeah, you can't do that.
Okay.
You can't do that in a job.
Okay.
You can do it. You can do it in WS Fed.
Okay,
You can go old school.
all right. I guess my question is that